Welcome, sleepless spirit. I'm your storyteller tonight, here to guide you gently into the shadows of slumber, where dreams take over and worries fade away. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more bedtime tales, whispered just for you. Let me know in the comments, where in the world are you watching from, and what time is it as you listen tonight? And if there's a story you've been longing to hear, something spooky, something comforting, tell me. I'm always listening. Now, tuck yourself in. Let the darkness wrap around you like a warm blanket. It's time to let go and drift into the story. It felt significant to move into our first home. Sarah and I finally had room after living in small flats for years. During the walkthrough, we were drawn to the Victorian-era house on a peaceful Portland street, which had original hardwood floors and built-in bookcases. It was also reasonably priced, remarkably so for the community. The previous owner had been elderly and had lived there 4 decades before dying quietly. According to the agent, natural causes, she had said, smiling with practice. All the family desired was a speedy sale. We painted the bedroom a lovely blue during our first weekend before closing in early October. We discovered the first note at that point. It was written in meticulous calligraphy on lined paper and put behind the radiator. From the house across the street, they observe. Twice every evening, the blue sedan stops by. Keep a record of everything. No date, no signature. I carefully folded it and tucked it into my wallet, but Sarah dismissed it as the ranting of an elderly guy with paranoia. More notes came to light during the following few weeks. Sarah was rearranging a cookbook when one slipped out. The mail comes in. It was precisely 11:47 a.m. A postal worker spends too much time at the mailbox. Inside the medicine cabinet, another was taped. Conversations are interrupted by phone clicks and compromised lines. Every note was dated and covered almost 2 years. At first, the handwriting was stable, but later ones displayed symptoms of hurry and shakiness. The information became more specific and in-depth. License plate numbers, times, and descriptions of passers-by. One rather lengthy message found inside a flower container detailed our neighbor's daily activities in great detail. It appears that Mrs. Chen, who lives next door, departed for work at 7:23 a.m. and arrived back at 5:47 p.m. most nights. Her kitchen light remained on until 10:15 p.m. In spite of myself, I began to pay attentively. At 7:23, Mrs. Chen did depart. At approximately 11:47, the mail did show up. Our street was frequently traversed by a blue sedan, although it could have been any person coming home from work. The notes established an odd intimacy with the former occupant of our house. According to the property deed, Harold Wickham was 83 years old when he passed away. The realtor said there were no living relatives. I couldn't help but wonder why he had been so meticulous in his documentation of the world beyond his windows. Sarah became weary of the revelations. David, it's becoming strange. Whatever else he left behind needs to be completely swept away. However, I found myself closely examining each message in an attempt to understand Harold's worries. I then located the picture album. It was wrapped in a plastic bag and stuck between the basement wall and the water heater. Hundreds of photos from our home were included, all of which were centered on the outside the street. Red ink was used to circle license plates. Question marks were placed on faces. In the margins were timestamps, occasionally accompanied by brief annotations. For the 3rd time this week, the same individual or an unknown car lingered for 47 minutes. The images covered several years. One knew a few of our neighbors from other times throughout their lives. Mrs. Chen, the teenage boy from 2 houses down, who was perhaps 10 years old and had shorter hair. Harold had been watching the mailman, and he had changed twice. However, the images that appeared to focus on nothing in particular were what unnerved me the most. Parked cars with no one inside, deserted street corners, our own front door, which was removed from what would have been Harold's upper bedroom window. Why take thousands of pictures of an empty door? That evening, I stood in our guest room, which had been Harold's bedroom, and gazed out at the street. It was the ideal angle. From here, you could see everything, every driveway, every home, every passerby. When Mrs. Chen departed for work the following morning, I found myself looking at the time, 7:23, as Harold had pointed out. At 11:49, the postal truck pulled up, near enough. A blue sedan passed, around 6:15 p.m., passing our house with a small slowdown. Sarah noticed me observing through the window. She remarked, "You're beginning to worry me." It was obvious that this old man was paranoid. Avoid being fixated on him. She was correct. However, I couldn't get rid of the impression that Harold had spotted something that we weren't. He didn't make notes at random. They demonstrated meticulous analysis and pattern recognition. This was not the rambling thoughts of a man going insane. This was deliberate and meticulous. When I discovered Harold's last note hidden within a cereal box that we had somehow overlooked, it was the turning point. The writing was rushed and unsteady. They are aware that I'm recording. The mail has been altered. The edges of the envelope are not aligned correctly. While I was at the doctor on Tuesday, there was someone in the house. Items were moved exactly 2 inches, measurable but subtle. It's time to speed up the chronology. Evidence concealed in a typical location. Nobody in uniform should be trusted. I looked everywhere, but I couldn't find this typical location. Sarah, who was certain that getting rid of all evidence of Harold would help us move on, planned a weekend to thoroughly clean up the basement. But I saw the blue vehicle once more on Friday night. For almost an hour, it parked across the street. Engine turned off. I had trouble seeing the driver. There was clearly someone inside, but the glare of the street lights caught the windshield. 20 minutes later, I checked again, and it was gone. On Saturday morning, there was an unexpected guest. Our front door was knocked on by a man in his 50s who identified himself as Detective Morrison. He gave me a badge and said he was investigating some unresolved issues surrounding Harold Wickham's passing. He soon reassured me that there was nothing untoward, only some inquiries concerning property that might have been part of the inheritance. Harold was meticulous in his recording. According to the family, "Have you discovered any records, pictures, or anything similar?" Pictures, or anything similar. His tone seemed strange for some reason. Too relaxed, to practiced. Harold's parting reverberated throughout my brain. Nobody in uniform should be trusted. Only a few old newspapers and bills. I lied with ease. Nothing significant. We cleared out the most of it already. Although he nodded, Detective Morrison's gaze was still on the room behind me. "Would you mind if I looked about a little? These old-timers occasionally conceal items in odd locations." I shut the door behind me and went outdoors. "In fact, we're leaving shortly. Maybe if it's official business, you could return later with a warrant." His eyes did not meet his smile. Naturally, merely attempting to assist the family in resolving any issues. After giving me his business card, he made his way back to his dark blue vehicle. I told Sarah everything that evening. She paid attention, silently, as I showed her the last message, the pictures, and Harold's notes. What if he wasn't paranoid? I inquired. What if he was right about something? Sarah held the business card of Detective Morrison up to the lamp. Silently, "The phone number," she said. "Take a close look at it." I took a peek. The badge number appeared to be in a different typeface than the name, and it was printed a little off-center. There was no record of Detective Morrison when Sarah called the police station the following morning. That weekend, we installed security cameras, new locks, and a suitable safe for Harold's records. We chose to heed his cautions, whether out of caution or paranoia. After 3 weeks, Mrs. Chen reported that she has been receiving weird phone calls and hang-ups at odd times. On pick-up days, the mother of the teenage kid asked if we had seen anyone looking through their trash. An old man who lived 2 homes down claimed that his mail had already been opened. I began photographing myself from Harold's former bedroom window. Various vehicles, unknown faces, delicate patterns that could be completely meaningless or completely significant. Despite her belief that I was losing my sense of perspective, Sarah assisted me in organizing the documentation. Harold's normal location, a loose board under the basement steps that we had overlooked during our cleanings was discovered last month. There was a manila packet with phone logs, bank statements, and copies of official documents that had been slightly but significantly altered. Dates are altered by 1 day, names are altered by 1 letter, and quantities are modified by tiny proportions. A handwritten message addressed to the person who follows was found at the bottom of the envelope. Harold explained in immaculate calligraphy that he had discovered something while looking over his own financial records, discrepancies that sent him into a rabbit hole of systematic small-scale fraud that affected the neighborhood's senior citizens. Nothing noteworthy enough to warrant further inquiry, but important across a number of victims and throughout time. Slowly, they made me vanish. It was written by Harold. My credibility comes first, followed by my health and finally my life. However, I kept a record of everything. The patterns revealed the reality. Sarah and I, before speaking, read the letter 3 times. "What are we going to do with this?" she finally inquired. I thought about blue sedans, phony investigators, and mail that arrives already opened as I gazed out Harold's bedroom window at the deserted street below. "We follow Harold's example," I said. "We observe, we record, we wait until the appropriate time. But occasionally, late at night, I ponder whether Harold's time came, or if we are merely the next names on their list, watching and anticipating the start of our own gradual disappearance. Perfect references were included with the house in Denver. Every rental application we had filed had been turned down or disregarded. We therefore didn't ask a lot of questions when Mrs. Patterson contacted regarding the property on Elm Street. The rent was affordable. She appeared sincere about wanting us as renters, and the area was peaceful. During the walkthrough, she informed us that the prior tenants were excellent, extremely tidy and respectful. They had to abruptly relocate for work. With a smile that bordered on relief, she gave us the keys. "I have no doubt that you will be content here." The cottage has an old-fashioned beauty to it, with original fixtures and wooden floors that creaked pleasingly underfoot. It was constructed in the 1940s. On a Saturday in March, Lisa and I moved in, thankful to have a place that felt like home at last. We were happy that Mrs. Patterson, who resided 3 states away, handled everything via email. The less landlord interference, the better. She had said that Uncle Robert, the brother of her late husband, resided somewhere in the area and might visit from time to see how the outside of the house was being maintained. But we never saw anyone who suited that description. The first month went along without any problems. We became accustomed to our routine. My nighttime strolls around the block, Lisa's morning jog, and weekend endeavors to personalize the area. Although most of the neighbors kept to themselves, they were reasonably nice. It seemed like a place where people valued one another's privacy. Then I became aware of the minor adjustments. The coffee machine was the first thing. When I got home, I discovered that it was plugged in, but not turned on, even though I was positive I had left it unplugged before leaving for work. Lisa's claim that she had neglected to plug it in that morning, plausible enough. The towels in the bathroom were folded differently a few days later. It wasn't precisely incorrect, but neither of us usually folded them that way. They were precisely wrinkled like soldiers, the edges lined up precisely. Lisa shrugged when I brought it up. Perhaps I was being extra careful. The events were so minor that I started to doubt my own recollection. Was that book on the kitchen counter, or had I actually left it on the coffee table? Was I being suspicious, or were the throw cushions on the couch rearranged? Lisa didn't feel as uneasy as I was. She said, "You're working too much. Stress causes you to become overly alert to unimportant information." But the information continued to mount. One Thursday afternoon, the thermostat was turned up by 2 degrees. When I was certain we had left the curtains open, they were drawn in the living room. The remote control that had been dying 4 days suddenly had new batteries. I began leaving intentional marks, a pen at a certain angle on my desk, a book at the exact edge of a shelf, and shoes at the entrance in a precise sequence. Day by day, these indicators were slightly tampered with. It shifted slightly, but not significantly, as though someone was taking care to avoid leaving any overt signs of entry. My decision to put a basic security camera in the living room was the turning point. Just a tiny wireless device that would record to my phone, nothing fancy. I placed it subtly on a bookcase without drawing attention to it. I was embarrassed by my own paranoia, so I told Lisa about it. I watched the video 3 days later. On Wednesday, Lisa and I were both at work when a man in his 60s came in the front door at 17 p.m. He was holding a key. With apparent familiarity, he walked through the house, straightening goods, rearranging our possessions, and spending a lot of time just sitting in our furniture. He spent about 20 minutes sitting in my reading chair, staring around the room with an expression I couldn't make out. The man's incursions were orderly, deliberate, and even courteous. He never destroyed anything or took anything. He appeared to be keeping the house up to his own standards of cleanliness. Prior to departing, he spent a few minutes in the bedroom, yet his actions were not visible due to the camera perspective. Before I showed Lisa the video, I viewed it 3 times. When she realized the ramifications, her face turned pale. She said, "How long has this been happening?" "Perhaps longer," I acknowledged. "Since we moved in. We thought of calling the police right away, but what would we report?" The property was being entered and cleaned up by a man who appeared to have authorized access. No signs of theft, vandalism, or threats were found. Our situation was unclear legally. We weren't proprietors. We were renters. I made the decision to speak with Mrs. Patterson personally instead. I called, and she seemed truly taken aback by what I had described. She spoke carefully as she stated, "Uncle Robert does have a spare key for emergencies. However, he ought to have called you before going inside. This is completely out of place." She asked us to change the locks as a precaution and offered to pay for it, saying she would talk to him right away. "I'm very sorry that this occurred." She claimed that since his wife died away last year, Robert has been under a lot of stress. Grief can cause people to behave differently at times. That weekend, we changed the locks, still uneasy, but feeling slightly vindicated. It was a logical explanation. A sad widower who keeps to rituals and seeks solace in familiar places. It provided him with direction. It was depressing, more than a danger. The invasions halted for 2 weeks. We started to unwind, attributing the incident to a regrettable miscommunication that had been cleared up. Then Lisa discovered the pictures. She found a shoebox hidden behind my winter clothes in my bedroom closet. Hundreds of pictures of us shot from inside the house were included. Images of us watching TV, having dinner, and sleeping. The images, which captured our everyday activities with an easy closeness, covered our whole 3-month stay. Technically proficient, the photographs captured unscripted moments from perspectives that suggested close examination of our routines. While we were working in the hallway, a few pictures were taken. The kitchen. While we were lounging on the couch, others came in through the doorway of the living room. Some appeared to have been stolen from behind partially open doors or from within closets. A notepad containing meticulously handwritten observations was located at the bottom of the box. Our timetables were well recorded. Lisa starts her run at 6:45 a.m., returns at 7:30. David departs around 8:15 for work and returns at 6 p.m. They took note of our preferences. The blue coffee mug is her favorite. The chair nearest the window is where he always sits. The personal observations were more unsettling. On Sundays, they quarrel about money. When she's under stress, she goes quiet. When he's anxious, he double-checks the locks before going to bed. Lisa's hands were shaking as she sat on the bed with the notebook. She said, "He's been observing us like lab specimens. This isn't sorrow. This is not the same thing." The phone went straight to voicemail when I tried to reach Mrs. Patterson again. Her email bounced back as undeliverable when I attempted to send it. At the address she had provided, there was no property owner by her name, according to a review of public records. We examined every square inch of the house that evening and found tiny holes strategically placed behind the painting, frames, next to ceiling corners, and inside closet walls. They offered ideal sightlines to our most intimate areas, yet they were almost undetectable unless you knew where to look. While deciding what to do next, we spent the night in a hotel packing the necessities. Even though the lease was in Mrs. Patterson's name, we couldn't lawfully break it without her contact information. The property management firm that handled our application asserted that they had no information about Mrs. Patterson or the cottage. Lisa wanted to go right away and take our deposit back. We must leave, she insisted, regardless of who this person was or what the circumstances were. This seems risky. However, I was hesitant to leave the cottage. It was home, in spite of everything. The rent was reasonable. The setting was ideal. Additionally, fleeing felt like allowing fear to override logic. What if we simply put in the right security? I recommended. There are CC cameras everywhere. Fresh deadbolts. An alarm system, perhaps. Lisa gave me a look I had never seen her make before. She asked softly, "You want to stay? After everything we found, you actually want to stay?" As much as it alarmed her, I was astonished that I wanted to stay. I couldn't understand why, but the cottage felt perfect, like I had been destined to find it. I was suddenly overcome with anxiety at the thought of leaving this ideal small place and beginning a new housing search. Even after we returned to the cottage equipped with motion sensors and a security system, Lisa was still uneasy. She insisted on sleeping with a chair leaning against the bedroom door, checked the locks constantly, and startled at the slightest sound. To a few weeks later, in the kitchen drawer, where we stored takeout menus, I discovered a fresh notebook. This time, the handwriting was less neat and more hurried. It said that they were now aware of the cameras. They're ideal for this area, but you'll need to exercise greater caution. They know what it requires. Only 3 days ago was the last entry dated. David is adjusting nicely. Lisa will change her mind, but she could require more time. Now they are at home. Within an hour, Lisa packed her luggage, spotting me reading the notebook. "Until you wake up," she whispered from the doorway. "I'm staying with my sister. You're being affected by this house, David. Do you not see that?" When she was gone, I sat in my reading chair, the identical one I had seen the elderly man occupy in the security footage, and took in the view of the cottage. It felt cozy and inviting with the late afternoon light seeping in through the windows. Every item was in its proper position, and everything was set up just the way it should be. I should have been afraid. Rather, I experienced an odd feeling of acceptance, as though I had at last discovered my place. In a way, the cottage felt like it was embracing me, and I felt totally at peace for the first time in months. I believe I'll leave the extra key by the front door tonight, beneath the flower pot. It could be useful to someone. It could be useful to someone. The neighbors were almost too willing to lend a hand when we purchased the home on Maple Ridge Drive. 3 families had offered to help and introduce themselves before we had even completed unloading the moving vehicle. Next door, Mrs. Ricks brought over a meal and insisted on showing us the key points of the area. A welcome basket containing discounts and business cards from the neighborhood was delivered by the Garcus from across the street. Even the teenagers from the house next door came by to volunteer to mow the grass. My wife Jennifer said, "What a friendly community." As we were eating that first night, Hendrick's tuna casserole was served. It's like something out of a 1950s TV show. Although the exuberance felt a little fake, I still agreed. For about 20 minutes, Mrs. Hendricks had been at our front door, inquiring about our jobs, our past residence, and our plans to renovate the property. The Garcus had been equally interested, asking about our daily routines and whether we had family coming to see us on a regular basis. In less than a week, we received invitations to a weekend BBQ, to neighborhood watch meetings, and 3 separate block parties. We were added right away to the Maple Ridge family WhatsApp group in the community, where neighbors exchanged everything from weather reports to suggestions for nearby services. The texts began early in the morning and persisted all day. "Greetings to all. Mrs. Ricks's lovely sunrise this morning at 6:47 a.m. Please note that tomorrow's garbage pickup is early because of the holiday. Starting 3:15 p.m. from Tom Garcia. Around midnight. Did anyone else hear that automobile alarm? I received a check around 8:20 a.m. from Patricia. Jennifer cherished the feeling of belonging. She immediately became involved in the group chat and said she had never lived someplace with such involved neighbors. In just 2 weeks, she was volunteering to plan the yearly block party and starting a reading club. I was more taciturn. There was something about the subjects that disturbed me, and the continuous contact felt overwhelming. Neighbors communicated detailed observations about each other's daily routines, inquired about guests, and often reported seeing strange cars. I just observed that the Johnsons still haven't taken out their trash. I hope all is okay. Somebody's seen 3 instances of an Amazon truck at the Patel residence this week. Must be preparing for something noteworthy. The remarks were extremely detailed, but not particularly malevolent. When we left for work, when we came home, who came to visit, what we ordered online, and even which lights were on in our house at different times of the night. I started to realize that our neighbors kept a close eye on everything. On a Thursday morning, Mrs. Hendricks knocked on our door, looking worried. The light in your bedroom was on until extremely late last night, I noted. I hope everything's all right, she said. People's sleep patterns can occasionally alter when they are under stress or experiencing marital issues. Both the remark and the implication surprised me. We're fine, I quickly said. Just watching a movie. Oh, good, she grinned, but her gaze remained fixed on my face. Simply put, everyone here cares about one another. A rapid shift in a person's routines typically indicates that they require assistance. I found myself determining which of our windows faced our house after she left. Her kitchen had a great view of our bedroom, so if she was keeping an eye on when our lights came on and off, what else was she watching? I made the decision to investigate my developing suspicion that weekend. I parked around the corner and strolled back to watch our street from the little park at the end of the block, even though I had told Jennifer was going to the hardware store. In 15 minutes, I saw Mrs. Ricks come out of check our driveway before going back inside her house. After 10 minutes, Tom Garcia stopped to look through our garage windows as he walked his dog by our house. An hour later, when I did go to the hardware shop, I casually mentioned my errand in the group chat. 3 neighbors got back to me in a matter of minutes, asking what project I was working on, offering to help with installation, and recommending other stores. When I told Jennifer about my observations, she believed I was being paranoid. Simply put, they are amiable individuals who value the community. She said, "You're not used to this kind of community, but it's actually really nice." Perhaps she was correct. I began to pay more attention to the group conversation and found patterns that unnerved me. But perhaps I was overanalyzing the situation. Discussions frequently centered on schedules, guests, and modifications to standard. In a level of detail that seemed excessive, neighbors discussed who would water their plants, pick up their mail, and keep an eye on things, while the elderly couple 3 houses down went on vacation. When I unintentionally sent a message to the incorrect conversation, I made a breakthrough. I sent it to the Maple Ridge family group instead of my brother, who I had intended to text about our lunch date. "Can't do Saturday afternoon," the message said. At that time, Jennifer has an appointment for treatment. I sent a correction right away, pointing out the error, but it was too late. Mrs. Ricks arrived within an hour with freshly baked cookies and a sympathetic ear for anyone who needed to chat. Tom Garcia casually inquired as to if we had located a reputable therapist in the region, noting the importance of mental health, particularly following significant life changes, such as relocation. I discovered Jennifer sobbing in the kitchen that night. "Everyone knows now," she said. When I encountered Mrs. Chen at the grocery store, she inquired about how I was managing everything. Patricia volunteered to suggest a support group for women experiencing hardship. Although I was upset with myself for making the error, I was much more upset with our neighbors for assuming right away that Jennifer's therapy was a sign of a crisis. "When did everyone in the neighborhood need to know that you're undergoing therapy?" I inquired. "That isn't it," Jennifer said. That's their response, as though they had been anticipating confirmation of a suspicion. In the days that followed, I became aware of how frequently our neighbors appeared to be outside when we left or came home. When I left for work, Mrs. Ricks was constantly taking care of her garden. When we got home in the evening, we often saw the adolescents shooting baskets in their driveway. At least 3 times a day, Tom Garcia took his dog for walks past our house, frequently arranging his schedule to align with our arrivals and departures. I started recording the trends by photographing the same subjects in the same settings every day. Beyond mere neighborly interest, the data pointed to a level of coordination. Jennifer looked at my papers for a long moment before she started talking. She said, "What do you think they want?" I said, "I don't know," in admission. However, I believe we must learn the fate of those who came before us. The Kowalskis, a 40-something couple with 2 teenage kids, had been the previous owners. Public documents show that they had resided in the residence for 8 years before abruptly selling it and relocating out of state. They were moving for work, the real estate agent had mentioned. However, I came across disturbing posts from Mrs. Kowalski's Facebook page when I searched social media. Weeks before they moved, she published her last posts, which alluded to feeling overburdened by community expectations and in need of some breathing room. According to one post, caring neighbors can become oppressive. Privacy is valuable. Yet another ready for a fresh start where we can just be ourselves. When I looked into the past inhabitants going back a few years, I discovered similar trends. Families arrived with great enthusiasm, got involved in local activities for a while, and then abruptly left with evasive justifications about changes in employment or obligations to their families. For our particular house, the turnover rate was abnormally high. When Jennifer searched property records, she found something even more troubling. In the last 6 years, our house has been marketed and sold 4 times, each time swiftly and for a little less than market value, as though the owners were eager to get out. What if this isn't about being friendly? As we went over our results one evening, Jennifer asked, "What if this is a methodical approach? I'm not sure if it's social pressure or loneliness masquerading as community." When I overheard a chat at the neighborhood coffee shop, the last piece came together. Mrs. Ricks was discussing the new couple on Maple Ridge with someone I didn't recognize. They are still in the process of adapting. The husband is resistant, she said. However, the wife is progressing well. All we have to do is be consistent and patient. It took the Kowalskis about 2 years to get to the breakthrough point, the other said. And then they left anyway. True community is too much for some people. Mrs. with what sounded like disappointment, Rick stated. But we don't give up. We'll find the one eventually. I felt sick when I left the coffee shop. We were involved in a process or experiment that had been used on past inhabitants, regardless of what was going on in our area. The question was whether the procedure itself was the goal or if we were being prepared for something specific. Jennifer and I made the decision to begin planning our own departure that evening. However, when we talked about possible moving dates and started discreetly looking at homes in other places, I saw that she was becoming less and less willing to stick to a schedule. She responded, "Maybe we're overreacting," when I proposed that we move in 2 months. We are genuinely cared about by our neighbors. Soup was brought by Mrs. Ricks when I last week. I had that cold. Without being asked, Tom assisted you in repairing the garage door, I said. That's exactly what I'm worried about. Jennifer, however, was already grinning at the messages from the evening as she browsed through the local WhatsApp discussion. She was adding events to the group's shared calendar this morning, including a potluck supper, a book club meeting, and a weekend cleanup day. She gave me a really perplexed expression when I asked about our plans to move. She questioned, "Why would we want to leave? We are now a member of the family." Tonight, as Jennifer assists in planning the neighborhood's holiday celebration, I sit in our living room with the curtains drawn, penning this down. She spent more than an hour on the phone with Mrs. Ricks, talking about volunteer schedules and decorations with a zeal that both reassures and frightens me. Outside, I can observe the well-known individuals. Today is Tom's third time taking his dog for a stroll. Under the streetlights, the teens were playing basketball. Even though the mail won't arrive until tomorrow, Mrs. Chen is checking her mailbox. They have something to wait for. Perhaps they're anticipating my stopping, fighting the want to join the community like Jennifer has done. Or perhaps they're hoping we'll move out like everyone else, so they can start over with the next family who will pay less than market value for our house. In any case, it seems to me that we are running out of time to make a decision. I had never seen a more comprehensive rental application than the one for the house on Birch Street. 12 pages of inquiries that covered much more ground than the typical employment verification and credit checks. They wanted to know about my food restrictions, sleep patterns and interests, my workout regimen, my interactions with family members, my favorite room temperature, and even the books I usually read before bed were all questioned. Isn't this strange? As my girlfriend Kate and I completed the applications, I inquired, why is it necessary for them to know if I like baths or showers? Kate shrugged and concentrated on a part that inquired about her preferred dispute resolution and stress management strategies. Perhaps they are simply really picky. The rent is less than market value, yet the house is stunning. They are able to be selective. Regarding the house, she was correct. The original hardwood flooring, the remodeled kitchen, and the expertly planted yard were all features of the well-maintained craftsman-style bungalow. Places like this typically went to the first candidate with good credit in Seattle's competitive rental market. However, Miss Chen, the property manager, had insisted on interviewing each prospective renter in depth. Miss Chen asked strangely intimate follow-up questions during our interview. She inquired about our cooking routines, our work-from-home schedules, and how much noise we could put up with from our neighbors. She took meticulous notes when I told her that I occasionally worked on freelance projects late into the night and inquired about my preferred lighting for evening work. We think it's important to find the ideal fit, she explained when I remarked on how meticulous her procedure was. Inappropriate tenant property matches can cause discomfort for all parties. We've discovered that thorough screening averts issues later on. We received the call 3 weeks later. We were chosen out of more than 40 candidates. Miss Chen was sincere in her want to greet introducing us to the property and said that the house's distinctive features perfectly matched our lifestyle. The process of moving in went smoothly. The house had been expertly cleaned, and a few minor details indicated that our application responses had been carefully considered. Organic foods that fit the dietary requirements we had specified were kept in the refrigerator. The home office was configured with the particular kind of desk illumination that I had indicated I like. Kate's usual brand of toiletries had even been placed in the bathroom. Kate expressed her admiration. They really went above and beyond, she added. I've never had a landlord who was so concerned about the comfort of their renters. Although I liked the consideration, there was something unnerving about the accuracy. How was Kate's favorite shampoo brand known to Miss Chen? Had she somehow looked into our past purchases? It was heavenly for the first month. The house appeared to be built for our way of life. At Kate's regular breakfast time, the kitchen table was perfectly illuminated by the early sun. For my late-night conference calls, the acoustics in the home office were superb. We loved to sleep in chilly weather. Thus the bedroom was set up to be cool during hot weather. I didn't start to notice how precisely the house seemed to fit our routines until the second month. The garden was watered by the automatic sprinkler system precisely when we were usually away from home. In order to avoid waking us during our regular sleeping hours, the mail hole was placed in such a way. Even the nearby homes appeared to plan their events, including parties, music, and lawn care, to keep our work schedules from clashing. Kate credited careful property management and good fortune for these conveniences. However, I began to focus on the specifics, and the patterns were too accurate to be coincidental. The turning point was when I found the journal that had been forgotten by the previous tenants stuck behind the basement water heater. The records covered almost 8 months of living in our home, and the handwriting was that of a man named Marcus. Marcus made passionate early entries. "This location is ideal. Everything functions just the way I want it to. I've never had a better renting experience." But as the months went by, his tone changed. "It's becoming strange to me how well this house fits me. It seems like it was made especially for my routine." Later entries become increasingly worried. "I discovered that before accepting my application, they had an interview with my ex-girlfriend, claimed that in order to match their lifestyle, they required a reference. Why would someone I dated 2 years ago need to know how I sleep?" Marcus's last writings were incredibly disturbing. They're doing more than just looking for quality renters. They are looking for particular kinds of people who meet certain criteria. However, what occurs if you no longer fit the profile? According to Sarah from the coffee business, the previous renter abruptly left after exactly 11 months of occupancy. He had seemed so content with the place that she recalled. The journal came to a sudden end. Marcus had definitely moved out after 11 months, according to the property records I could find online, but there was no forwarding address provided. I began looking into the rental history of the residents and found a trend. For the previous 5 years, each tenant had stayed for 9 to 12 months before abruptly leaving. Tenants praised the property management and ideal living conditions in the generally excellent web reviews. Nonetheless, none of them spoke of remaining more than a year. What I discovered when I looked up the former tenants on social media was more concerning. 3 of them had removed their accounts completely. 2 others appeared to have completely changed occupations and relocated to distant locations. One person's LinkedIn profile revealed a several-month lapse in employment without providing an explanation. At first, Kate disregarded my worries as overanalyzing when I told her about my findings. Tenants with comparable lifestyles are so drawn to the house. That's, she remarked. Not evil. Smart property management is what it is. She became serious, though, when I handed her Marcus' journal. She said, "What do you think they're doing?" Although I had no solution, I began to take more thorough notes on our personal experience. Our mail occasionally arrived, already opened and carefully received, I noted. The app for the smart thermostat always optimized for our desired comfort levels, displaying temperature changes that neither of us had made. Our recommendations for streaming services also appeared to be based on viewing data that we hadn't created. The most disturbing thing I discovered was that our bedroom smoke detector had a tiny camera lens integrated into it. It was of expert quality, hardly noticeable, and seemed to have been incorporated into the house's original design rather than added later. Similar devices were concealed in light fixtures, air vents, and decorative features in other rooms that I examined. Kate insisted that we approach Miss Chen right away, but when I tried to reach her office, the phone was unreachable. The website of the property management company had been removed. I carefully studied our lease agreement, and even it was very evasive regarding our landlord's identity and the true ownership of the property. We should have left right away, but something prevented us from doing so. The house nonetheless felt ideal to us in spite of the unsettling findings. Its spaces allowed our routines to flow naturally. Productivity at work was at an all-time high. In this setting, even our relationship felt more harmonic. Kate remarked, "Maybe we're overthinking this," as we talked over our alternatives one evening. Whatever they are doing is genuinely improving our quality of life. We have never been happier than we are here. What concerned me was that she was correct. The house was doing more than just catering to our tastes. It was improving them, honing them, and perhaps altering them in ways we weren't entirely conscious of. I began spending a lot of time outside the house to observe how I felt free from its influence. After a few hours away, I was agitated and uneasy and longed to get back to our precisely balanced setting. It had the same impact on Kate. However, it didn't appear to worry her as much. When I proposed that we resume our apartment search, she questioned, "Why fight something that's working? We're paying less than market rent for a space that improves our happiness, health, and productivity. What are the drawbacks?" When I noticed that we were getting close to the 9th month of residency, the drawback became evident. We had maybe 2 or 3 months before something happened that would force us to go, or before something made us want to leave, or before we were forced to leave. According to the pattern I found, I began saving money for unforeseen moving expenses and keeping crucial documents close at hand in anticipation of that scenario. Kate, however, appeared more and more opposed to the notion of going anywhere. Last week, she said, "I don't want to live anywhere else. We are understood by this house. Why would we sacrifice that?" She gave me a rather perplexed expression when I questioned her about Marcus' notebook and the monitoring gear. "What kind of surveillance gear?" she inquired. "There are no cameras that I can recall seeing." I led her inside the bedroom and gestured toward the smoke detector, but the camera lens was missing when I checked myself. There were no indications that the device had ever been altered. It appeared to be a typical smoke detector. I looked in the other rooms at night and discovered cameras. Everything was back to its regular, everyday fixtures. Either someone had been in our home to take the surveillance equipment out while we were away, or I had just dreamed it. I know what I saw, yet Kate seems pleased that my paranoid phase is over. The dilemma is whether the camera's removal indicates that we've passed a test or that we've advanced to a new stage of the process we're involved in. I discovered a fresh lease agreement tucked beneath our front door this morning. The time frame is month to month instead of annual, but the terms are the same as our existing lease. A handwritten note is enclosed. "Well done for finishing the evaluation stage. We are eager to keep up our arrangement." Kate wants to sign right away, since she's thrilled about the flexible lease terms. She began discussing the possibility of relocating here permanently and possibly even asking about someday buying the house. However, Marcus' journal, the former tenants who vanished from social media, and the 11-month pattern that is quickly approaching are all things that keep coming to mind. Kate is clearly happy as she reads the new lease agreement tonight and is already making plans for the modifications she wants to make to the house. She seemed to be happier than I have seen her in years, and that's the main thing that terrifies me. The seller of the Tudor-style home, Wood Lane, demanded an exceptionally thorough assessment before we purchased it. In addition to the routine structural and electrical inspections, thorough evaluations of the soil composition, water purity, air quality, and even measurements of electromagnetic fields across the site. Mr. Vance, the inspector, spent 3 full days inspecting each area using equipment I had never seen before. My husband Mike said, "Very thorough," while we watched Vance measure the space where our future bedroom would be. The vendor must genuinely wish to stay clear of any liability concerns. Mr. in his 60s, Vance was a quiet man who worked methodically and precisely. He inspected ventilation systems, checked paint samples, and took thorough written notes and photos of everything. He stated that contemporary homebuyers were becoming more worried with environmental issues that could impact health and well-being. When I asked about some of the more bizarre tests, "You'd be surprised how many houses have hidden issues," he stated as he examined ambient ionization levels with a device. Prior proprietors don't always reveal issues that they themselves were unaware of. There were 47 pages in the inspection report. It mostly dealt with common problems. A few sections addressed what Vance referred to as environmental optimization options, while other sections addressed normal wear and tear items, minor electrical improvements, and suggested roof repair. Room by room, the natural lighting patterns of the house were examined. A detailed map of air circulation was created. Even the acoustics were assessed, and suggestions for enhancing auditory comfort zones were made. Mike said, "This guy's really earning his fee." While we went over the report, the question is, do we really need to know the exact decibel levels in the bathroom? Even though some of this sounds excessive, the way the report presented everything as room for growth, rather than as current issues, really got my attention. It was an inefficient house. For improved living conditions, it could be improved and optimized. Vance had provided a long list of experts and contractors who could carry out his different suggestions. We moved in gradually over the next few weeks after closing on the house in September, Mr. Advance began calling us for follow-ups almost quickly to see how we were settling in and to provide extra services to handle any issues that might have arisen. When I stated that other inspectors hadn't kept in contact after closure, he clarified that it was simply part of my whole service. Problems that weren't noticeable during the initial evaluation are frequently discovered during the first few months in a new residence. Initially weekly, the calls gradually increased in frequency. In several rooms, Vance would pose targeted questions regarding our general comfort, energy levels, and quality of sleep. He volunteered to come back for more testing as soon as I told him that I had been unable to focus in the home office. Subtle environmental influences can occasionally take time to show their consequences, he stated. To find possible causes, I can perform some further analyses. I really wanted to pay for another inspection, but Mike wasn't convinced. Since moving in, I had become less productive and had been experiencing strange restlessness in several parts of the house. I wanted to know if my well-being was impacted by environmental circumstances. Vance came back with more gear than previously. He spent hours in the home office asking me specific questions about my work habits, stress levels, and physical ailments, while also taking readings that I didn't understand. After he was done, he suggested changing the lighting in the space and adding specialist air filtering equipment. He showed me graphs and charts that I didn't understand, explaining that the electromagnetic interference from your computer system is interacting with natural ionization patterns in unanticipated ways. The best possible cognitive function should be restored by these changes. Although the upgrades came at a cost of about $3,000, the difference was striking. My ability to concentrate significantly increased in the days after the installation. I was more focused, aware, and at ease in the environment. Vance seemed sincere when I thanked him for fixing the issue. According to him, environmental optimization is an exact science. The majority of individuals are unaware of the profound impact their physical environment has on their mental and emotional health. In the months that followed, Vance started to show up frequently in our lives. He would give more evaluations for other rooms and call to see how well his changes were working. Vance suggested modifying the lighting and air circulation in the bedroom. But Mike expressed dissatisfaction with the quality of his sleep. He recommended particular adjustments to the room's acoustic characteristics after I described experiencing anxiety when preparing meals in the kitchen. Every intervention was successful. Just as promised, our home became more cozy. Every room was designed with its specific purpose in mind. We felt happier overall, worked more productively, and slept better than we had ever felt anywhere else. However, I became aware that our tastes were shifting to accommodate the changes made to the property. Having always been a night owl, Mike started going to bed early to conform to the optimal sleep cycle in the bedroom. I discovered that I tended to steer clear of things that didn't operate well in the altered spaces and toward those that did. When I attempted to read in the living room one evening, I came to the troubling fact. I had been enjoying the mystery novel I had selected, but all of a sudden it became boring and hard to concentrate on. However, after I moved into the office, the same book regained its interest. Vance didn't appear startled when I brought this up to him during one of his check-in conversations. Diverse forms of cognitive activity are supported by diverse settings. The changes we've made are intended to improve certain mental functions in each space, he explained. It makes sense that you might find some hobbies more fulfilling in their ideal settings. I began purposefully experimenting with this phenomenon. Some songs sounded nice in the bedroom, but startling in the living room. In the altered kitchen, spicy meals that I had previously loved now looked overwhelming. Depending on the room we were in, even our conversations with Mike felt different. More casual in the kitchen, more cerebral at the workplace, and more intimate in the bedroom. When I told Mike what I had seen, he dismissed my worries. So, he remarked, "The house makes us feel good. That is the purpose of a cozy home, isn't it?" However, I was starting to question if the word comfortable was appropriate. The house was doing more than just catering to our tastes. It was molding them, directing us toward particular actions and reactions that complemented Vance's changes. When I looked into Mr. Vance's credentials, I found that he offered more than just home inspections. Additionally, his business provided environmental psychology optimization and residential behavioral consultancy. Client reviews on his website highlighted significant gains in their productivity, relationship happiness, and quality of life following putting his suggestions into practice. The scholarly articles I discovered written by Vance and published in unknown journals were more worrisome. Subliminal environmental conditioning in homes and the neuroplasticity reaction to controlled habitat alteration were among the titles. The abstracts talked about how environmental influences might affect emotional reactions and behavioral habits in ways that people wouldn't be aware of. During his subsequent visit, I challenged Vance about this, but he didn't appear defensive or shocked by my revelation. Calmly, environmental psychology is a legitimate field of study, he declared. Everything I've done in your home is designed to improve your well-being. Are you not happier here than you were in your previous residence? He was correct. We were more content. However, I was beginning to wonder if that contentment was truly ours, or if it was a result of external factors. Manipulation. What would happen if we wanted to undo some of the changes? I inquired. Vance appeared truly perplexed. Why would you want to undo well-performing improvements? You're less stressed. You are more productive. You are now more satisfied with your connection. These results are objectively favorable. His attitude changed a little when I asked him about informed consent, and if we had consented to engage in behavioral training. He said, "You asked for environmental optimization. I used the best techniques available to provide you exactly what you requested. I proposed to Mike that evening that we get a sense of how the changes were impacting us by spending a few days away from the house." He claimed that travel would interfere with his recently enhanced work and sleep regimen, which made him hesitant to depart. "I feel better here than I have felt anywhere," he stated. Why would we want to mess with that? Mike stayed at home and I went to my sister's for the weekend. By Sunday night, I had regained my sense of self in a way I hadn't recognized before. My preferences went back to how they had been. I was able to read mysteries in any room, savored spicy food once more, and felt at ease listening to a variety of musical styles. The changes felt more burdensome than comfortable when I got home. The acoustics in the kitchen seemed too soft, the lighting in the home office too bright, and the air circulation in the bedroom too managed. However, these feelings subsided in a matter of hours, and I was able to return to the routines that the house appeared to promote. During my absence, Mike had not observed any change. He appeared more comfortable with the routines that complemented Vance's adjustments. If anything, he gave me a really perplexed face when I proposed that we might want to locate another inspector to assess the environmental impacts. However, he said that everything was operating flawlessly. For what reason would we wish to make any changes? Vance made an appointment for his quarterly follow-up evaluation over the phone last week. He aimed to assess the change's long-term efficacy and pinpoint any areas that might profit from additional improvement. I'm especially curious to evaluate the changes made to the kitchen. He remarked, I have some new techniques that might enhance the space's potential for social bonding and nutritional decision. Mike is looking forward to the visit. He has a list of small comfort concerns that he wants Vance to take care of, areas that could be added to our ideal home to make it even better. Additionally, I find myself anticipating the evaluation, even while I have serious concerns about what Vance is truly doing to our house and our psyche. The house has grown so cozy and well suited to our requirements that it seems impossible to imagine living anywhere else. Nearly unimaginable. As Mike sleeps soundly in our acoustically improved bedroom tonight, I sit in the home office and write this down. The thing that scares me the most is how perfectly everything feels. The seller of the Cedar Point Road home provided us a hefty binder titled Property Maintenance Guide when we moved in. Initially, it appeared to be a considerate action. Contact details for nearby service providers who were aware of the special peculiarities of the home, seasonal garden care advice, and comprehensive instructions for the sprinkler system. My wife Amanda raved, "This is incredible," as she leafed over the painstakingly arranged portions. As you can see, they even have a timetable for when to change the air filters and clean the gutters. When maintenance is due, we won't have to guess. The binder was remarkably thorough. Each system in the house included a maintenance section, schedules that are categorized by day, week, and even month. Detailed charts illustrating which plants need care at what times, the best times to water them, and when to apply fertilizer were included in the landscaping section. There were warranty details, emergency contact lists, and troubleshooting instructions for issues we had never thought of. I found the level of specificity in the schedule to be uncommon. There was more to changing the furnace filter than merely every 3 months. March, June, September, and December 15th were the dates that it needed to be modified. Throughout the week, several zones of the garden watering system ran on precisely scheduled cycles. There were precise dates set for even mundane chores, like cleaning windows and changing smoke alarm batteries. I remarked that they must have been quite well organized, but that the level of detail seemed excessive. Before moving away for employment, the Hendersons, the previous owners, had occupied the residence for 12 years. In line with the realtor, they had kept the house immaculate because they were model homeowners. That assertion was undoubtedly backed by the maintenance binder. Each page demonstrated meticulous attention to detail and years of collected knowledge about the particular requirements of the house. We instantly began adhering to the timetable, in part because it looked so well planned and in part because we respected the Henderson system. Following the recommended care regimen, the garden flourished. The systems in the house operated with ease. Every maintenance procedure was scheduled precisely to stop issues before they started. However, as the weeks went by, I realized that the timetable was more than just comprehensive. It was draining. Almost every day, there was something that needed to be done. The pool's chemical levels were to be checked on Monday. Tuesday was dedicated to checking for moisture problems in the basement. Wednesday was dedicated to washing particular windows and testing the security system. Larger jobs like air duct inspection, gutter cleaning, and seasonal garden preparation took up the weekends. Amanda enthusiastically accepted the routine. She would approach every chore with the satisfaction of someone who follows a tried-and-true method. Looking at the binder when she woke up each morning to see what needed to be done that day, she appeared truly uneasy when I proposed that we occasionally forego some of the less important things. She questioned, "But what if something goes wrong?" Clearly, the Hendersons had excellent reason when they created this schedule. They had no significant issues during their 12 years here. She was right, but it seemed to me that the home was taking charge of our life instead of the other way around. Maintenance work took up every evening. Larger projects took up every weekend. Due to the binder's constant need for care, we hardly ever had time for leisure or social activities. My decision to look up the Hendersons online, because I was interested in the folks who had developed such a complex system, was the turning point. What I discovered was perplexing. James and Patricia Henderson had a busy social life, traveled a lot, and were involved in community organizations. According to public documents and social media profiles, the time-consuming maintenance regimen they'd abandoned didn't seem to fit with their way of life. When I searched up their prior address, I discovered something more alarming. Over the previous 20 years, the Hendersons had resided in 3 separate homes, leaving behind comparable maintenance binders at each location. Online evaluations and real estate advertisements for their former residences mention their rigorous property care regimens. Amanda appeared more interested than worried when I brought this up to her. Perhaps they simply mastered their method of housekeeping. She suggested, "It should undoubtedly work for us if it did for them in several homes." However, I was starting to question if the maintenance schedule was helping or hurting us. Our social life was vanished. Due to the house's constant urgent maintenance needs that couldn't wait, we had ceased hosting guests, declined dinner invites, and cancelled weekend getaways. I began keeping track of how long the daily chores truly took. Quick 5-minute checks. As the binder put it, usually took 30 to 45 minutes when planning, carrying out, and cleaning up. The weekly chores took up whole evenings. Whole weekends were consumed by the monthly projects. We were spending about 20 hours a week on maintenance duties. I discovered when I evaluated the entire time investment, maintaining a residence that had allegedly been in immaculate shape amounted to the equivalent of a part-time work. When we purchased it, I remarked to Amanda that we could be taking the schedule too literally. What if we changed it to make it easier to handle? She gave me a real panic look. However, she remarked, "We are unsure of which jobs are essential and which are not. What if we overlook something crucial and result in costly harm?" Her worries were out of proportion to the danger. However, I made the conscious decision to omit a few small activities in order to verify my theory. For example, testing each light switch once a week and monitoring the humidity levels in the basement every day. Nothing negative occurred. The house kept running smoothly. However, Amanda was more outraged than I had anticipated when she learned what I had done. She spent the evening making up for Mr. Simons after quickly going over the full schedule to see what I had missed. Her words, "We can't just ignore the system. It's there for a reason." I became more aware of how Amanda's conduct was being impacted by the maintenance schedule. Even small jobs with little urgency have caused her to grow concerned when they weren't finished on time. Before she could unwind in the evening, she had become obsessed with crossing things off the daily list. She discussed the demands of the house as though it were a live thing that would suffer if we failed to fulfill our obligations. The most disturbing shift was that she had begun to mention changes or enhancements we might like to implement. "Until we check what the binder says about proper preparation timing, we can't paint the kitchen," she would remark, "or I would on the front yard, like to plant roses. However, we must first investigate the potential impacts on the current maintenance plan." The house had become our work and no longer our home. However, rather than feeling burdened, Amanda seems to find solace in the arrangement. I made the decision to get in touch with the Hendersons' former home's current owners to inquire about the maintenance binder they inherited. I eventually located Maria Santos, who had purchased the Hendersons' previous Phoenix home from 2 years ago. She exclaimed, "Oh God, that binder," as soon as I brought it up. "Are you still following it?" I was shocked by her response. "You stopped using their system. I realized it was taking over my life after about 6 months," she said. Instead of living in the house, every day was spent on its upkeep. My spouse and I were often worn out, and since we were usually working on maintenance projects, we hardly ever saw our friends. She informed me that she had finally put the binder away and engaged a professional company to manage everyday activities on a more flexible timetable while handling critical repairs. The house remained intact. She stated it. As it happens, the majority of that everyday upkeep was superfluous. She was silent for a time when I inquired if she had observed any changes in her conduct while adhering to the program. Finally, she replied, "My husband got really attached to it. He demanded that we continue to follow the protocol even after I wanted to stop." That's right. If we missed even small things, he would become really upset. It began to have an impact on our relationship. I showed Amanda my study on the other residences and my chat with Maria Santos that night. I thought she would be relieved to hear that we could lower our maintenance commitments without facing any repercussions. Rather, she became defensive. Our expectations shouldn't be lowered just because someone else couldn't manage the duty. I said, she said, "This house deserves proper care, and the Hendersons created a system that ensures it gets what it needs." I felt uneasy when she described its demands. As though the house were a sentient being rather than a possession, I progressively ceased helping with the more involved maintenance chores during the next several weeks, but Amanda really stepped up her efforts to stick to the timetable. She would stay up late to finish anything she couldn't get done throughout the day, then get up early to finish chores before work. She resisted my suggestion that we hire experts to do some of the more labor-intensive work. According to the binder, owner supervision is crucial for appropriate upkeep, she said. We cannot just assign our duties to others. We were spending more time cleaning the house than enjoying it, I pointed out. However, she gave me a look that implied I had said something unethical. She said, "This house is an investment. After 12 years of flawless maintenance by the Hendersons, it's our turn now. We have a duty to uphold that level of care for upcoming owners." Amanda was in the garage at midnight last week, rearranging the tool collection based on a new section she had found in the binder that listed the best times to store and maintain each tool. She had spent hours working on it, comparing the directions with the resources we already have and creating a shopping list for the things the binder thought vital. Excitement filled her voice as she asked, "Did you know we're supposed to oil the pruning shears monthly? And there's a specific rotation schedule for storing different types of screwdrivers to prevent handle deterioration?" She shook her head when I suggested she continue the project tomorrow. She said, "I have to get this done tonight. Pool chemical testing is scheduled for tomorrow, and if I miss the regular timetable, I won't have time for tool maintenance." I discovered a note from Amanda this morning stating that she had taken a day off work to finish up some long overdue maintenance. The message was written in the same meticulous handwriting style as the original binder, with equal attention to methodical order and exact sequencing. In accordance with the binder's monthly deep maintenance plan, she's in the basement tonight performing a thorough inspection and cleaning of the water heater. She has been down there for 3 hours, and I can hear her chatting softly to herself. She's most likely reading the directions out loud to make sure she's following them exactly. I've begun to question whether the Hendersons genuinely created the maintenance binder, or if they were merely the victims of a system that turns people into caregivers for homes that don't require much upkeep. Additionally, I'm starting to think Amanda is already organizing the binder she will leave for the beer of our house. Our realtor strongly suggested the moving business. She dialed Transition Home Services. Full service moves for working professionals are their area of expertise. Everything from assisting you in establishing your new routine to packing and unpacking. A little pricey, but the stress alleviation makes it well worth the money. I was undoubtedly a busy professional, as was my spouse, Derek, both lawyers who work 70 hours a week. They both fear the complications of relocating from our condo in the city area to the suburban home we purchased in Riverside. They provided us with a quote that covered everything, including unpacking, moving, packing, and even integration services to aid in our adjustment to our new surroundings. It was too excellent to refuse. A week prior to the relocation, Robert, the team leader, visited our unit to inspect our possessions and talk about our preferences. He asked specific questions and was informative and professional regarding our lifestyle choices, work schedules, and everyday routines. He wanted to know when we usually woke up, how we liked our kitchen to be set up, and even what kind of lighting we liked best for reading. He clarified that the objective is to make your new home seem like home right away. We can better arrange everything to support your natural cycles the more we know about your lifestyle. Some of his queries sounded very personal, but overall it seemed like great customer service. He inquired about our relationship dynamics, stress levels, and sleep quality. Robert took careful notes and said that a change of scenery frequently helps couples re-establish their relationship. When I indicated that Derek and I had been fighting more recently because of work pressure, according to him, new places open up possibilities for novel designs. There are times when a relationship requires a new beginning. The day of the move went perfectly. This staff showed up early, worked quickly, and handled everything with tact. They carefully loaded our goods, packaged them methodically, and moved everything to our new home without any problems. While taking notes on a tablet and overseeing the process, Robert periodically quizzed us about particular objects or setups. "Where do you want to set up your home office?" Derek was asked. "Although you might prefer the more peaceful area in the back of the house, I believe that the room with morning sunlight would maximize your productivity based on our chat." Even more amazing was the unpacking procedure. Our possessions weren't just placed in rooms by the personnel. They made arrangements everything with consideration, resulting in useful areas that were more well organized than our previous condo had ever been. Subjects and usage frequency were used to organize the books. Kitchenware was arranged to maximize efficiency. Our clothing was also arranged to facilitate more efficient everyday tasks. Derek said, "This is incredible." As we showed off our immaculately set up home that night, they seemed to be able to read our thoughts about how we wanted everything to be put up. Robert had left a comprehensive manual outlining their organizational decisions and providing advice on how to keep things running as efficiently as possible. The arrangement of the kitchen was created to encourage wholesome cooking practices. The layout of the bedroom encouraged improved sleep hygiene. Even the furniture in the living room was arranged to support relaxation and discussion. Everything seemed ideal during the first several weeks. In the new location, our regular activities went without a hitch. We appeared to quarrel less, were less worried, and were more productive. We were more efficient and comfortable than we had been in years, because to the house, which complemented our lifestyle in unexpected ways. But over time, I noticed that rather than the other way around, our behavior was shifting to fit the way the house was organized. The layout of the kitchen had caused us to start eating different meals. In order to capitalize on the workplace setting, Derek had adopted new work habits. Our social patterns had changed as well. The living area appeared to be built for entertaining, so we hosted additional parties. One evening, half jokingly, I told Derek that it was like the home was training us. He chuckled, but I saw that he had inadvertently changed his reading position to fit the lighting arrangement that Robert's team had designed. "Perhaps we are simply finding better ways to live. The changes weren't unpleasant," he said. Indeed, these appeared to be advancements. We were more robust, more productive, and well organized. However, I couldn't get rid of the impression that we were changing to fit in with our new surroundings. When I made the decision to reorganize a few items to better suit my own tastes, my worries grew. The coffee maker felt clumsy and ineffective when I moved it to a different counter. The new configuration seemed to add needless morning tension when I attempted to rearrange the bedroom closet. Even minor adjustments felt incorrect, as like the house was set up correctly and shouldn't be changed. Derek had less desire to alter things. When I suggested that we might want to customize some of the places, he said, "Why mess with something that's working so well?" It was clear that the squad was skilled. When I started looking at transition home services online, I came across positive evaluations from happy clients, but the tone of the remarks was strangely similar. People commended the organization for changing their way of life, making their daily routines more efficient, and bringing harmony to their living areas. After this assisted them in settling into their new homes, several reported feeling more like themselves. However, when I searched for complaints or unfavorable reviews, I discovered just few. The few negative remarks expressed a sense of being confined by the setup or a failure to personalize the area. However, these were overshadowed by overwhelmingly positive comments. What I found out when I reached out to former clients personally was even more concerning. Though their accounts of their post-move lifestyles sounded oddly similar, the majority were excited with their experience. They had all established comparable routines, systems of organization, and methods for running their homes and interpersonal interactions. Janet Morrison, one of the women I spoke with, had utilized this for a transfer 18 months prior. "It changed our whole life," she exclaimed. "We're so much happier and so much more productive now. We have never had a stronger marriage." Janet explained methods that were almost exactly the same as what they had designed for us when I questioned them about the minutiae of how they had set up their house. The same rules and patterns applied to the arrangement of the kitchen, the bedrooms, and even the furniture in the living room. "Do you not want to personalize it or make any changes?" I inquired. The question seemed to really perplex Janet. For what reason would we wish to alter something that works so flawlessly? The group designed the best setup for our way of life. Derek disregarded my worries as adjustment anxiety when I tried to talk to him about them that evening. His words, "You're overthinking this. This is the happiest place we've visited in years. We are less stressed. We are more productive now. Our relationship has improved. What more would you like?" Regarding the objective benefits, he was correct, but I was starting to wonder if they were worth the sense of diminished autonomy I was experiencing. It was awkward to deviate from the house's apparent expectations about how we should live for reasons I couldn't quite put my finger on. I chose to purposefully interfere with some of Robert's arrangements in order to test my theory. I rearranged shelves, rearranged furniture, and adjusted lighting in a few areas. Derek and I both became restless and agitated in a matter of days. Our regimens lost their effectiveness. We began to argue more often, and our stress levels rose. "Will you kindly return everything to its original state?" After a particularly trying week, Derek inquired, "I don't understand why you want to make our lives harder." Our peace returned and our stress levels instantly dropped when I put Robert's plans back in place. Although there was no denying the association, it made us wonder if we were conditioned to favor this way of life, or if we were voluntarily choosing it. Robert contacted to arrange a follow-up session 3 months following the transfer. "Just checking in to see how you're doing," he said. "After a while, folks may need to make a few little changes to the room." Derek expressed his excitement for the follow-up appointment and listed a few minor concerns he wanted Robert to resolve. Although I had more mixed feelings, I was interested in what enhancements Robert would recommend. Upon his arrival, Robert spent hours examining our lifestyle and making minor adjustments to his initial plans. He made seemingly small changes to the lighting, moved furniture a few inches, and rearranged storage systems, yet he felt instantly more at ease. He informed us that you had adjusted to the original arrangement quite well. Your experience should be even more optimized with these changes. As Derek and I went about our daily business in our freshly streamlined areas that evening, I became aware that I no longer recalled the specifics of our previous condo's living arrangements. In contrast to the mechanisms Robert had developed for us, our prior routines appeared disorganized and ineffective. Derek remarked, "I can't imagine living any other way," as we sat in our reading chairs that were just right. "We are our finest selves in this house." He was correct. However, I couldn't get rid of the impression that Robert had created our best qualities rather than them coming naturally to us. Our friends Mark and Lisa asked Derek for a moving business recommendation last week. They need full service assistance with their transition as they are moving across town. Derek recommended transition home services right away, complimenting them on their expertise and transformative outcomes. As he talked about our encounter, I observed that he was speaking in the same terms that Janet Morrison and other former customers had told me. Words regarding harmony, optimization, and changing one's way of life. They will design the ideal living space for you. Derek reassured them. Your question, how you manage to live in any other manner. I'm writing this tonight while seated in my work chair in the best possible position. In the nighttime routine that Robert's team created for us, under lighting that is adjusted for optimal cognitive performance. What scares me the most is that everything feels just fine because I can't recall what it was like to make my own decisions. To survive. 3 days after we moved into the house on Willowbrook Drive, I received an invitation to join something called Neighboring through my email. Sandra Mitchell, the former homeowner, sent the note, outlined how the app was utilized by every resident in our development to remain in touch, exchange resources, and uphold community safety. Necessary for new residents, she wrote. The app guarantees that you have access to all community resources and safety procedures and facilitates a speedy integration. The download link is provided. Emma, my wife, was intrigued right away. As she loaded the app onto her phone, she remarked, "This is exactly what we need. It's always difficult to move to a new neighborhood. It will be so much simpler to have a direct line of communication with neighbors, with areas for social coordination, resource sharing, safety alerts, and community announcements. The app's layout was polished and easy to use. With 43 active households, our neighborhood was depicted as a well-defined area. Each household was represented by a profile icon that displayed basic information such as names, locations, and the length of time they had lived there. Several neighbors sent us welcoming greetings within hours of our arrival, along with useful details about trash pickup times, suggestions for nearby services, and invites to forthcoming community gatherings. The degree of involvement was remarkable. Social gatherings were planned, carpools were arranged, and information was aggressively disseminated. Emma said, "Take a look at this," as she browsed the activity feed on the app. Mrs. Patterson offers to share some of her garden's produce. Next month, the Johnsons are planning a neighborhood party. A neighborhood book club is even being organized by someone. An exceptionally cohesive community appeared to be facilitated by the app in order to assist one another with chores like pet sitting and package delivery. Neighbors frequently exchanged resources, posted updates about their daily activities, and planned timetables. Living there was like being in a little town where people actually cared about one another. However, as the days went by, I saw that the app's capabilities extended beyond standard neighborhood communication. There was a thorough database of everyone's work schedules and contact details, a sophisticated scheduling system that recorded when people were at home or away, and even a function that let neighbors report on activity in real time. Why should they be aware of our vacation dates? For security reasons, I asked Emma when she was making changes to our family calendar on the app. She clarified, neighbors can monitor the situation and report any suspicious activities if they are aware of when houses are empty. It's like to receiving a complimentary professional security service. Although the reasoning made sense, I felt uneasy about the amount of private data the software gathered and disseminated. Every day, the entire neighborhood may see the documented routines, work schedules, trip plans, and even purchasing patterns. Although optional, the degree of openness felt intrusive. What was more worrisome was Emma's rapid reliance on the app for everyday decision-making. Every morning, she would check it to see what her neighbors were up to, organize her errands with other residents, and even modify our plans in response to local events. She seemed genuinely concerned and recommended that we might want to restrict the amount of information we gave. We won't be completely assimilated into the community, though. The app only functions if everyone participates equally, she stated. Neighbors will not trust us if we are not open and honest. I began observing how other residents used the program and saw what appeared to be excessive trends. People consistently posted updates on their activities. They are heading to the grocery store right now, returning from work early, and enjoying dinner outside this evening. The amount of documentation seemed less like communication and more like surveillance. Tom Rodriguez, our neighbor, shrugged off my worries when I brought this up in a casual discussion. He remarked, "I know it seems like a lot at first, but you realize how much safer and more connected it makes everyone feel once you get used to it. We've averted break-ins, stopped parcel theft, and forged genuine connections with people we might not have otherwise met." Regarding the advantages for the community, he was correct. Since joining NeighborLink, we've been asked to friendly social events, borrowed tools from neighbors, and gotten assistance with yard maintenance. Our quality of life was improved by the app's facilitation of sincere friendships and helpful assistance. However, I couldn't get rid of the sensation that there was a fundamental flaw in the system. I eventually took the time to carefully study the app's terms of service, which gave me broad authorization to gather and examine user data for the sake of improving community safety and efficiency. Additionally, it stated that consumption trends were examined in order to enhance local harmony and pinpoint places in need of help. I wondered what sort of intervention. When I looked up information about NeighborLink online, my worries grew. The company's website was simple and provided scant details regarding the funding and business plan of its creators. The service's financial viability and the fate of the data it gathered were not well explained. There weren't many reviews or conversations regarding Neighborlink that I could find. It was cited as an example of successful community integration technology in a few scholarly articles, but I couldn't find any critical evaluations or user complaints. I made the decision to get in touch with Sandra Mitchell, the former homeowner who had extended the invitation to us, to find out how she found the app. She gave a passionate, yet strangely generic, response. Our community experience was revolutionized via Neighborlink. We were happier, safer, and more connected than we had ever been in any community. It's a necessary tool for contemporary communal living. Her answers to my more detailed inquiries regarding privacy issues or any drawbacks of utilizing the app got evasive and appeared to sidestep, rather than directly answer my inquiries. I tried limiting my usage of the app that weekend to see how my neighbors would respond. I stopped sharing information about our weekend plans, stopped publishing regular updates, and stopped answering every community message. The reaction was quick and alarming. Emma got several texts from neighbors inquiring about our family's well-being. Mrs. When Patterson came to see how we were doing, she said she had observed that we were not as involved in community events. To make sure we weren't experiencing any issues with the app's functionality, Tom Rodriguez gave us a call. Emma responded, "People are worried about us." After receiving multiple worried texts, everyone becomes anxious when you abruptly cease taking part in communal contact. They believe there may be a problem, rather of being encouraging. The pressure to continue actively participating felt forced. Emma got really upset when I mentioned that we might want to use the app less often. But, she added, "We're finally blending in. Our neighbors have faith in us. We're part of the community. When we need help, we have it. Why would you want to put that in danger?" I saw that Emma was unable to think about the possible drawbacks of such extensive community monitoring, since she had grown emotionally reliant on the approval and connection the app offered. When I stumbled upon a discussion site where former Neighborlink users discussed their experiences after leaving areas that used the program, I had a breakthrough. The tales were strikingly alike. Initially excited, but then becoming uneasy about the surveillance features, finding it hard to cut back without social repercussions, and having trouble readjusting to typical privacy standards when moving away. Michael Chen, a former user, talked on how he struggled to make decisions on his own without seeking advice from his local network, and felt addicted to the continuous validation from the community. Lisa Williams, another, stated that our family had relocated, especially to get away from what she described as the oppressive connectivity of their community on Neighborlink. According to her, it begins as beneficial communication, but eventually turns into a system that prevents you from making personal decisions without the consent and involvement of the community. You can no longer simply live your life in private. Emma rejected these findings as the gripes of those incapable of managing real community involvement. When I presented them to her, those individuals most likely discovered how alone and dangerous they were when they relocated to areas without Neighborlink, felt in the absence of appropriate community support. "That's not our problem," she said. It sounded just like the defensive language other users had reported in the forum conversations. So I was worried by her reaction. Last month, the app released a new tool called Community Wellness Monitoring that records residents' activity patterns and produces warnings when someone's conduct deviates from their typical routine. The feature was advertised as an improvement in safety that could help recognize when elderly neighbors might need assistance or when security issues might be developing. Emma quickly enrolled our family in the monitoring system because she was thrilled about the new feature. She compared it to having a safety net. Our neighbors would immediately know if something were to happen to one of us and be able to aid. However, the wellness monitoring seemed to be the last phase in turning local communication into all-encompassing surveillance. In addition to tracking the content we decided to share, the app now recorded trends in our everyday behaviors that could be examined for anomalies and deviations. The app sent me an automated notification this week letting me know that my community engagement score had fallen below ideal ranges and offering suggestions for how to get more involved in local events. Specific suggestions for enhancing my integration were given in the message, including increasing the frequency of my updates, going to more social gatherings, and reacting to community posts faster. Emma got a similar message, but with different suggestions that centered on leading neighborhood projects and planning more community events. It was as if through computational study of our personalities and behavioral patterns, the app was actively forming our positions in the community. Emma is using the app to develop a community garden project and is holding a neighborhood planning meeting in our living room tonight. There are 8 neighbors present, all of whom are ardent neighboring users who attribute their improved quality of life to the app. As I observe them working together via their phones, continuously adding task assignments and meeting notes to the app, I come to the realization that they no longer only use NeighborLink, it is where they reside. The app's UI mediates and influences their everyday routines, social interactions, and decision-making processes. Emma also appears to be happier and more content than she has been in a long time, surrounded by neighbors that value open, connected community living as much as she does. The only person who is still unsure of what we have truly signed his knee up for, and whether any of us can recall what it's like to live without continual digital supervision and social acceptance. However, given how content everyone appears to be, I'm beginning to wonder if my worries are still relevant. The seller included a surprise bonus when we purchased the property on Maple Grove Circle, a free consultation with a home wellness expert, Mrs. Davis. The vendor clarified that she'd been collaborating with Dr. Helena Nash for 3 years to make her living space as healthy and happy as possible. It significantly transformed my quality of life. We learned this during the closure from Mrs. Davis. I was able to comprehend the impact of my family environment because to Dr. Nash, everything, including my mental stability and sleep habits. I'm including the consultation as a housewarming present, even though it's worth at least $500. The proposition piqued the interest of my wife, Rachel. The thought of improving our living environment for greater health appealed to her wellness-focused perspective, as we had both been dealing with stress from our demanding careers. Rachel enthusiastically accepted a Saturday morning appointment when Dr. Nash contacted to arrange the consultation. 1 week after we moved in, Dr. Nash showed up exactly on schedule, a well-dressed woman in her 50s with an enormous bag full of different measuring tools and evaluation supplies. She identified herself as a licensed environmental psychologist with expertise in examining the impact of living environments on both physical and mental health. Most people are unaware of how deeply, as she set up her equipment, she noted that their home environment affects their well-being, stress levels, sleep quality, cognitive performance, and emotional stability can all be impacted by factors including lighting patterns, furniture placement, and air circulation. The consultation process was exceptionally comprehensive. For more than an hour, Dr. Nash measured everything in the house, including the electromagnetic readings from our electronics, light levels, air quality, and noise levels. She took numerous pictures of every area and meticulously documented our color palettes, furniture placements, and overall organization. The amount of time she spent asking private questions, however, caught me off guard. She was interested in our daily schedules, interpersonal relationships, health issues, and stresses from our jobs. With the same amount of detail she used to examine our physical surroundings, she inquired about our food habits, social activities, exercise routines, and sleep patterns. When I remarked on the intimate nature of her inquiries, she clarified that environmental optimization necessitates an awareness of the full individual. A place that encourages one way of life could be harmful to another. Before I can suggest how you should live, I need to know who you are. Rachel enthusiastically responded to all of the questions, revealing information about our ongoing battles with anxiety and insomnia, our sporadic disagreements over domestic duties, and our difficulty striking a work-life balance. In addition to taking notes and paying close attention, Dr. Nash periodically probed further into our psychological tendencies with follow-up questions. Dr. Nash committed to evaluating her results and provide a thorough report with detailed suggestions for improving our home environment. At the conclusion of the session, she stated that the procedure usually took a week or so, and that her suggestions frequently led to significant improvements in the quality of lives of clients by strategically altering their living space. I've witnessed families totally shift their dynamics, couples save their marriages, and individuals conquer despair. As she gathered her equipment, she said, after precisely 1 week, the report was delivered, 23 pages with thorough examination and suggestions. Dr. Nash had discovered a variety of, it was said that our home environment was causing us stress, relationship problems, and health problems. Natural circadian rhythms were being disturbed by the illumination in the bedroom. Poor nutrition choices and hurried eating habits were encouraged by the kitchen layout. It was said that even the layout of the furnishings in our living room was impeding deep emotional connection and meaningful communication. Every issue has a comprehensive, detailed remedy. We had to install specialist lighting systems in several rooms, reorganize furniture based on exact measurements, swap out some colors for ones that would foster psychological balance, and establish daily schedules that complement our home's ideal energy patterns. As Rachel read the suggestions, she exclaimed, "This is amazing. Take a look at how she pinpointed the precise causes of our stress and sleep issues. These adjustments could resolve thus many of our issues." The suggestions weren't inexpensive. The entire environmental optimization package that Dr. Nash suggested would cost close to $8,000, and the lighting changes alone would cost more than $2,000. However, Rachel felt certain that the advantages outweighed the costs. Consider the amount of money we spend on stress relief, sleep aids, and treatment. According to her, if optimizing it is actually cost-effective to address these problems at their roots in our family setting. I had additional doubts. Some of Dr. Nash's assertions regarding environmental psychology appeared to be unsupported by science, and the recommendations felt overly strong. Her certification came from an organization I'd never heard of, and her published research was only published in journals that I could find online. When I looked up her qualifications, were excluded from major academic databases indexes. However, Rachel had already begun putting some of the more straightforward suggestions into practice, and she maintained that they were having an impact. She claimed to be sleeping better after rearranging the bedroom to Dr. Nash's specifications. She claimed to feel less nervous and had adjusted our nighttime routine to fit the ideal schedule from marital harmony. I said it might be a placebo effect. However, Rachel insisted that the adjustments were actually making things better. When Dr. Nash gave us a call to inquire about our progress, Rachel excitedly set up a follow-up meeting to talk about putting the more detailed suggestions into practice. Dr. Nash showed up with thorough room layouts that included installation, timelines, and vendor recommendations. As she outlined the goals, Dr. Nash clarified that environmental optimization is a process. We begin with fundamental adjustments and work our way up to total living space harmony with your physical and mental requirements. I was concerned about how detailed her suggestions were getting. She did more than just recommend that we change the lighting. She gave precise bulb types, installation locations, and usage schedules for each day. She didn't only advocate moving furniture, she gave exact angles and measurements. She even recommended changes to our daily schedule, including when we should eat meals, regarding how we ought to move from work to leisure pursuits. How can she know exactly what will work for us? After Dr. Nash left, I asked Rachel, for someone who has only met us twice, these suggestions are extremely detailed. Rachel brushed my worries aside. She is an expert with years of expertise. She has likely witnessed hundreds of couples with comparable problems and is aware of the best ways to resolve them. With an almost obsessive fervor, Rachel devoted the next few weeks to putting Dr. Nash's advice into practice. She purchased the specialized lighting systems, moved furniture to meet the precise requirements, and started going about her day as Dr. Nash had instructed. She kept meticulous records of her stress levels, mood, and sleep quality, attributing improvements to the changes in her surroundings. However, I began to see that Rachel was being more and more inflexible about upholding the new procedures. She became agitated when I made even little furniture movements, demanded that I adhere to the daily routines precisely, and wouldn't change the lighting or the regular procedures that Dr. Nash had set up. When I mentioned we might want to loosen the restrictions occasionally, she responded, "We can't just ignore the system whenever it's convenient." These protocols were created by Dr. Nash using scientific concepts. We won't fully profit if we don't adhere to them regularly. I started doing more in-depth study on Dr. Nash and found some concerning trends. Testimonials from her former clients, which were posted on her website, spoke of very comparable experiences and significant improvements in their lives. Environmental optimization, fervent adherence to her guidelines, and a great reluctance to depart from her advice. What I discovered when I reached out to several of her former clients personally was more worrisome. Many spoke of feeling imprisoned by the structures Dr. Nash had established, unable to work well in settings that didn't meet her requirements. According to one woman, her family had spent more than $20,000 putting Dr. Nash's advice into practice and became dependent on keeping the atmosphere at its best. "We can't travel anymore because hotels don't have the right lighting," she said. "At friends' homes, we are unable to unwind due to the hectic and stressful atmosphere." Dr. Nash developed the ideal framework for us. However, we can only feel at ease in that particular system at this time. Instead of being worried, Rachel became defensive when I told her about these findings. "Those individuals most likely did not properly implement the recommendations," she said. "Or perhaps they were averse to constructive change because of underlying problems." Her statement, which sounded like the kind of justification people employ when they are psychologically dependent on something unhealthy, worried me. Dr. Nash set up follow-up meetings every month to assess our progress and adjust the optimization procedures. She would make minor changes to our systems during these trips and suggest further changes that would ostensibly increase the advantages we were already enjoying. And on her third visit, she stressed that environmental optimization is a continuous process. As you adjust to every stage of moreover, we may put in place more advanced procedures that will raise the bar for your well-being even further. Every consultation led to fresh suggestions, more purchases, and adjustments to our everyday schedules. Rachel happily accepted all of the recommendations, but I was starting to believe that we were caught in a never-ending cycle of relying on Dr. Nash's advice. My attempt to surprise Rachel with a weekend trip to a neighboring resort marked a turning point in our relationship. The thought of spending 2 nights in a setting that hadn't been maximized in accordance with Dr. Nash's procedures truly upset her. "What if the right lighting schedule prevents me from falling asleep with anxiety?" she inquired. "What if the atmosphere of the hotel makes me anxious once more? I've put a lot of effort into controlling my stress levels. I can't risk reversing that advancement." She was so terrified of leaving our ideal setting that she decided to cancel the trip and stay at home instead, where she felt secure and at ease. I came to the realization that evening that Dr. Nash had done more than simply enhance our living environment. She had established a psychological dependency system that prevented Rachel from functioning normally in any other setting, whether on purpose or not. She had transformed our home into a jail under the pretext of a healing center. Dr. Nash indicated last week that Rachel might be prepared for more complex optimization procedures, which would call for even more significant adjustments to our daily schedule and house. The prospect of attaining what Dr. Nash refers to as total environmental harmony excites Rachel. Dr. Nash argued that my resistance might be causing energetic discord that was sabotaging Rachel's growth when I voiced concerns about the rising prices and growing complexity of the systems. Sometimes one partner adapts more quickly to optimization than the other, she told Rachel privately, though I overheard the chat. This can create tension that interferes with the beneficial effects we're trying to achieve. When I question any part of Dr. Nash's advice, Rachel now looks at me suspiciously. as though my skepticism were a danger to our health, rather than a legitimate worrying about our circumstances. As Rachel follows her tonight, recommended evening ritual in our ideal setting, I'm wondering if I'm the issue or if we've both fallen prey to a complex system that aims to foster reliance rather than true wellness. However, when I observe how calm and happy Rachel appears to be in a regulated setting, I'm beginning to wonder if my worries are more important than her enjoyment. Even if achieving that happiness means ceding our independence to someone else's idea of the ideal life. The agent told us that Mrs. Elena Blackwood, the former owner of the colonial house on Sycamore Street, had been somewhat of a local historian when we purchased it. He claimed that she maintained thorough records of the property since the house was constructed in 1923. She apparently conducted research on every family that had been there, leaving behind a sizable collection of records pertaining to the property's history. James, my spouse, was captivated by the notion of studying the history of our house. When we discovered Mrs. Blackwood's study materials in a basement filing cabinet, he combed through property records, newspaper clippings, and handwritten notes for hours, recording almost a century of the house's past residents. He showed me a manila folder with the name Morrison family on it and added, "Look at this, from 1956 to 1961 in." There were family photos, birth certificate copies, newspaper announcing their accomplishments, and even their children's school report cards. She kept detailed records of everyone who resided here. Mrs. Blackwood has an exceptionally comprehensive collection. She had folders with personal information about each family who had owned the house, in addition to basic details, relationships, professional endeavors, and individual challenges. She had somehow obtained or copied financial records, communications, medical records, and even diary entries. How did she get all this personal information? As James handed me a packet with divorce documents from a couple who had been in the house in the 1970s, I inquired. He said, perhaps the previous owners left things behind, or perhaps she simply had community connections. Small communities have a rich history. Mrs. Blackwood appeared to be passionate about the research. Her handwritten notes demonstrated a thorough examination of the relationships and trends among the several families that had occupied the residence. With the commitment of an academic researcher, she had documented significant life events, relationship troubles, health concerns, and changes in her job. However, as I examined further files, I observed that Mrs. Blackwood was not just interested in history. She recorded what appeared to be inappropriate and intrusive information: family conflicts, financial hardships, extramarital affairs, and private medical diagnoses. Photographs that seemed to have been taken without the subject's knowledge were included in certain files. As the first discovered a file with surveillance-style pictures of the Peterson family, who had resided in the residence during the 1990s. In essence, she was pursuing these individuals. James brushed off my worries as being too sensitive. He described her as a thorough researcher. Decades ago, all of these families called this place home. Now, it is merely historical data. However, I was bothered by the consequences of our discovery. Mrs. Blackwood had done more than study the history of the house. She had been methodically gathering confidential data on families, chronicling their most intimate moments and sensitive times. Upon closer inspection of the filing system, I found that Mrs. Blackwood had arranged the material thematically rather than chronologically. There were sections titled Health, Marriage Issues, and Financial Stress, Problems, and Disputes within the Family. She had compared data from several families, searching for trends and links that went much beyond typical historical concerns. The part under vulnerabilities and opportunities was the most unsettling. This included Mrs. Blackwood's evaluation of the shortcomings of each family, difficulties in the workplace, relationships, and finances, as well as suggestions on how to take use of these weaknesses for the best results. What did she mean by optimal outcomes, in your opinion? I questioned James. However, his attention was focused on reading about the Ricks family who had occupied the house in the 1980s. Ignoring my question, he said, "Look at this. The same issues plague the Ricks, with the water pressure problems in the upstairs bathroom and the heating system we're experiencing. The house seems to have ongoing maintenance issues." Understanding Mrs. Blackwood's reasons for gathering so intrusive data about past residents piqued my interest more than plumbing issues. I looked up additional information about her past and discovered that, despite having lived in the house for more than 30 years, she had few acquaintances, no family, and few social ties in the neighborhood. The obituary I discovered for her characterized her as a private individual with a strong interest in local history in the archives of local newspapers. However, neighbors with whom I had casual conversations had different memories. Mrs. Blackwood has always seemed to know more than she should about people's private affairs. According to some, she had a knack for learning things. People would be shocked by what she knew about their families and their issues. According to an elderly neighbor, it was useful to certain people, just when they needed it most. She would provide them guidance or help. It was obtrusive to others. I took a different look at Mrs. Blackwood's research after reading this comment. What if she hadn't been merely gathering data in a passive manner? What if she had been utilizing her expertise to enter people's lives and provide support in times of need in order to obtain even more private information? In her subsequent files, I discovered evidence in favor of this view. Previous homeowners left thank you cards expressing their appreciation for Mrs. Blackwood's prompt aid and compassionate support during trying times. It seems that she has assisted families in overcoming financial difficulties, marital issues and medical crises that have a remarkable ability to show up at the perfect time and offer the ideal assistance. When I showed James the letters of gratitude, he remarked, "She was like a guardian angel for this house. She really cared about the families who lived here." However, I was starting to notice a more concerning trend. Mrs. More access to people's personal information and more control over their choices always seemed to follow from Blackwood's assistance. Several emails described how, after helping us through times of distress, Mrs. Blackwood had grown to be like family or our closest confidant. Finding Mrs. Blackwood's planning documents for what she referred to as intervention techniques was the most disturbing thing I discovered. These demonstrated how she had located families at risk, investigated the particular stressors they faced, and devised strategies for interacting with them at times when they would be most open to outside influence. Her plan for assisting the Johnson family during their foreclosure problem in 2010 was detailed in one paper. She had thoroughly examined their financial status, determined when they would need help the most, and positioned herself to provide a solution that would necessitate constant communication and engagement in their private lives. I pointed out the intervention strategy materials to James and warned him that this was manipulation. She wasn't assisting others out of altruism. She was taking advantage of their weaknesses in order to take charge of their life. James appeared defensive, but uneasy. Perhaps all she needed was to feel productive. He stated, "People who are lonely sometimes become unduly concerned in other people's lives. She is not malicious because of that." However, I was beginning to question whether Mrs. Blackwood had had a greater impact on earlier families than the records showed. I found concerning trends in the experiences of some of the more recent homeowners when I got in touch with them. The Peterson family, who occupied the home between 2015 and 2018, explained how Mrs. Blackwood, who had assisted them during a time of unemployment, had gotten more and more involved in their day-to-day activities. Mrs. Peterson informed me over the phone that she began as a neighbor, providing support, but with time, we felt compelled to consult her on all significant decisions. It gets right to the point where without her input, we were unable to make decisions on our own life. Our experience was similar to that of the Chen family, who had owned the house right before us. Mrs. Blackwood was well informed about our marriage, our family, our money, and our kids' academic issues. She was always available and helpful, but in retrospect, it felt like she was managing our life instead of just helping us. Both families stated that it had been challenging to leave the house. because they had grown mentally reliant on Mrs. Blackwood's care and direction. Not because they loved the property. They had to regain their self-assurance in their ability to make choices on their own. James looked more worried, but still hesitant to accept the implications. When I shared these talks with him, the years of depending on her counsel for everything, from parenting techniques to job decisions. So, he said, she was controlling. But now she's gone. What she did with past families is irrelevant. Finding Mrs. Blackwood's last project, a thorough file titled Future Residence Integration Protocol, provided the solution. This included comprehensive plans for building relationships with the person who purchased the house after her passing, including tactics for winning their trust, figuring out their weaknesses, and progressively extending her control over their lives. Based on our mortgage application and correspondence with real estate agents, the file contained background information about our family that Mrs. Blackwood had gathered prior to her passing. She had recognized my worries about my financial stability and James' interest in history as possible areas of contact. Her strategy for posthumous influence was the most terrifying. Mrs. Blackwood had made arrangements for the upkeep of the house to be purposefully neglected, causing issues that would force new owners to turn to neighbors for assistance after they had received training on how to progressively become involved in our private matters. Even after Mom passed away, she intended to maintain power over us. I demonstrated the integration process, research materials, helpful neighbors, and even maintenance issues to James. It's all geared to make us dependent on outside aid and eventually relinquish our privacy and individuality. James took a long look at the papers before answering. Finally, he continued, but we don't have to follow her plan. We can choose to disregard the findings and get on with our own lives. However, I could see that Mrs. Blackwood's influence was already at work as he spoke. James had spent weeks engaged in the house's history, becoming emotionally invested in the stories of prior families. He had begun asking his long-standing neighbors for maintenance-related tips. He had even started keeping meticulous records of our own experiences in the house, unintentionally adopting Mrs. Blackwood's method. When Mrs. Rodriguez, our neighbor, dropped by last week with a casserole, she noted that Mrs. Blackwood had asked her to watch the person who purchased the house. She appeared surprisingly informed about our previous issues with the water pressure and heating system and offered to help with any issues we might be encountering. Eleanor always said this house needed people who understood its history, Mrs. Rodriguez stated as she began to talk about our neighborhood adjustment, which turned into a 2-hour discussion. Her goal was to ensure that incoming residents felt included and supported. James is entering our personal experiences into Mrs. Blackwood's filing system tonight, recording our move-in procedure and our initial thoughts on the house. He seemed really interested about adding to the historical record, having started a new folder named The Williams Family 2024. He appeared taken aback when I asked him why he was carrying on Mrs. Blackwood's job. Someone should document what happens to this house, he stated. The people who lived here before them will be of interest to future residents. However, I can't get rid of the impression that by using Mrs. Blackwood's method, even if just ostensibly, we're consenting to join the cycle of power and influence she created here. And I'm beginning to doubt if what Mrs. Blackwood did to earlier families, or what she continues to do to them, is the true question.